The Gokyo is very important to the development of technique. It was originated at the turn of the century to incorporate all of the basics and all of the fundamentals of Judo, gripping, kumakata, kazushi, body positioning, and of course feet positioning. All of the katas, all of the Gokyo incorporate all of these important things. And no matter what technique we do, whether it's a competition example of the technique, Gokyo is imperative in order to introduce these basic fundamentals into our technique. The basic principles that Jigaro Kano wanted to introduce were the basic fundamentals of the gripping and the kumakata. The balance of the technique, and he was very big on balance, very big on movement, momentum and balance of the technique, and also the shape of the technique. He also concentrated on the use of the legs working with and in conjunction with the hands, because that is also very, very important, and all of the katas incorporate these very important elements. With the change of the rules 2 years ago, a lot of people thought that it was going to change the whole pattern and the whole Judo as a whole. I think that if you have a look at some of the top stars, when they teach technique, Koga, for example, especially with his seoi-nage and his incredible seoi-nage, people want to see that fantastic one-handed seoi-nage. And actually, when he teaches it in his own DVD, he teaches the basic, the fundamental direction, head going straight ahead, looking at where he wants him to land. And his body position is very basic, fundamental, it's upright, and his feet are pointing in the same direction. It's very basic and very fundamental. What happens is then he puts his own initial stamp of Koga all over the technique, and that's when he starts to throw his head between his legs and he starts to do the one-handed seoi-nage. But it all derives from the basic, fundamental technique. A lot of people are saying that we should have modern katas. We should have modern techniques as part of a modern Gokyo. I really believe that this is a good idea. I think that we should have modern katas, and I think that we should have modern Gokyo. But we should never forget the basic fundamentals, because we always have to go back to the base, the foundation. And that, I think, was one of the key elements of what Jigaro Kano was after. He never wanted us to forget the basic and the fundamentals and what make up the techniques. Because the basics and the fundamentals, the Gokyo, is used in all of the modern techniques that are used today by the great champions. It incorporates all of it. Sometimes only in part, and sometimes as a whole. But the important thing to remember is that we still have to go back to that basic fundamental. We mustn't forget that. The Gokyo is the Gokyo, and we must keep it. So therefore, we start with the Gokyo, and then we move on from the Gokyo. That's when we start to put in the modern interpretations. And the modern interpretations are something that will always evolve. Evolution in Judo is something that is inevitable. Techniques move on. But we must never forget the basic fundamentals of the Gokyo. The Gokyo, to me, is the home of Judo. It is the base fundamental, it's the start. And I think it's where a lot of coaches and a lot of fighters need to go back to the base fundamentals. Learn how the individual techniques work, the basic mechanics, because that's the important thing, is knowing how a technique works. breaking it down, so we've got the whole thing, we've seen it, we know how it works, you know, how the whole thing looks. Then we've got to break it down, and then we have to put it all back together again. And the Gokyo is a really good starting point for any coach out there and for any fighter that's trying to get to the next grade. Have a look at how it all begins, have a look at how it's all put together, and then let's put it all back together and make it work.